I
love that.
knew, for instance, that the community part was going to be really important because Make Bad Art is largely about getting past all of the shoulds and musts, and I have to do it the right way. And, all of those beliefs that largely are related to perfectionism in one way or another in our heads, the stuff that we were taught to do. You have to sit still. You have to be a good girl. You have to follow all the rules.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I chat about stories and creativity in all different styles and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and my goal is to promote what Dale Carnegie stated in his famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said, instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. To know all is to forgive all. It's my firm belief that the goal of most creative people is to try to understand themselves and others. That's what makes artwork of all kinds so compelling. But more than that, the personal stories of my guests promote understanding as well. Roger C. Schenck, a cognitive scientist, said, human beings are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. It's my hope that Story Power will help us understand each other better by sharing the stories of my guests.
Okay, so I am really excited to talk to you again about all your things that we talked about way long time ago. When I put your stuff up on Patreon,
Yeah.
because I keep getting in my feed your podcast, and I just don't listen to podcasts anymore because I got my headphones on, and now I've started something new where I'm wearing my headphones a lot, editing things. But it looks like that's going great guns. And then I was wanting to know about your Make Bad Art workshops, because I think you were just starting those when we started to talk. So before I forget, I want to introduce Nancy Norbeck as my Story Power guest, episode 125. And Nancy, obviously, you and I have talked before, so I'm really excited to hear what you're up to now.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back. And I am up to, I'm still doing the podcast. So Follow Your Curiosity is still going. Good. And I know that this is going to go out in a couple of weeks, but to my astonishment and amazement, this coming week I will be releasing my 100th Creative Pep Talk episode, which blows my mind. It is... I can't remember how many episodes there are total, but it's somewhere around 280 right now. Wow. So, but it's the 100th Creative Pep Talk. When those were suggested to me as something that I might want to think about doing, I never would have believed that I would come up with 100 things to talk about as a Pep Talk episode. So it is amazing to me that here we are at number 100. It's been 4 years, I think.
Yeah. Is that how long your podcast has been going?
The podcast is a little over 6 years. I started that. I launched it in January of 2019.
Because mine's 5 years this year. 5 years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you launched your, what is it called again? Your
Follow Your Curiosity.
Yeah, Follow Your Curiosity is the podcast. What are the little extras that you just
They're
mentioned?
Just called Creative Pep Talks.
Creative Pep Talks. When did you launch those?
About 4 years ago. It was the early part of 2021, somewhere around March, May, somewhere in there.
Were we still locked down, or we were still in the throes of COVID, though?
Yeah, we were still mostly at home at that point. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I really thought I'll be able to do 10, maybe 20 of these, and I'll probably run out of steam and won't have anything else to say because, There's how many of these things am I really going to come up with? Well, at least 100, apparently.
Yes, good for you. Oh, that's so great. I love it.
Yeah,
I
it's
love it.
kind of mind-boggling. And I'm also still teaching Make Bad Art.
Oh, good. Now,
Yeah.
when we talked last time, which I don't even remember when that was, I should have looked it up. I think you were just launching
Yeah.
that, and I I thought it sounded so fun. So it must be successful because you're still going.
It's still going, and it's so funny because when I talked to you, it was before I started doing it. And
Yeah.
what is so interesting is that, and really, like, I knew this before, but it's one of those things that but you don't really know it until you've done it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is going to happen because you've designed it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what the course sets out to do.
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't know is how it's going to play out in practice. You
Right.
don't know how people are going to react to what you've designed. You don't know how it's exactly going to come together because you haven't gone from theory to practice yet. And so, what has been so interesting and so amazing to me is to see how it's come together the way it was intended to and how it has gone beyond what I imagined it doing.
Oh, I
I
love that.
knew, for instance, that the community part was going to be really important because Make Bad Art is largely about getting past all of the shoulds and musts, and I have to do it the right way. And,
Mm-hmm.
all of those beliefs that largely are related to perfectionism in one way or another in our heads, the
Mm-hmm.
stuff that we were taught to do. You have to sit still, you have to be a good girl, you have to follow all the rules, all of that stuff. And,
Mm-hmm.
you get it from your family when you're growing up, you get it from your teachers in
Mm-hmm.
school, you get it, from your professors in college, you get it from your bosses at work, you get it from Instagram. Everybody's telling you how you have to be. You get it from advertisers. You get it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in this culture wants to tell you who you have to be and how you have to be it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, while you can try to undo all of this stuff yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
certainly it's possible to do it yourself, good Lord, but it is so much easier when you are in the company of other people who are doing it too. Because you're not
Yes.
alone and you have that camaraderie of, hey, it's not me against the world, it's us against the world.
Right.
And it makes such a huge, huge difference. And it doesn't matter if it's just one other person or if it's a group, though, the more the merrier, the more the
Right.
better, because then you really feel like you have this solidarity with other people.
Right. Yeah.
But it is such a critical piece of the puzzle. It will help you get there so much faster than if you try to do this by yourself. I guarantee you, if you try to do this by yourself in 6 weeks, because the course is a 6-week course, you're not going to get nearly as far as you will in a group. And
Yeah.
so that has
Yeah.
been one of the biggest things, is seeing, I knew it would make a difference, but I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
predict just how much of a difference
Mm-hmm.
it was really going to make. And it is such a critical thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need a support system. You
Yes.
can't, it's hard to, I'm not sure it's even possible to grow on your own because the support system gives you different perspectives. And one thing Alan Katz said yesterday or the day before when I was talking to him, that we tell stories to ourselves in our heads, and until somebody gives us a new perspective, we just think that that's the truth. You
Mm.
know, it's hard to break out of that cycle of thinking like that if you don't have some way to stop it and to get a new perspective on it. Yeah, so that's so great. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
love
we've just,
that.
there are things I could not have predicted. I
Mhm.
mean, I could have predicted that, if you do the things that are in the course, it's going to make a difference, right?
Right.
I
Mhm.
could not have predicted that one of the students in the course who came in and, was an avid I feel bad even using this word now for reasons you'll understand in a minute, was an avid crafter, realized before the end of the 6 weeks that she wasn't really a crafter, she was a fine artist. And not only that, not only did she redefine her own identity, not long after she made that realization, she was approached from out of the blue by the new director of a brand new fine art gallery in her town to exhibit her work in the gallery.
Oh, cool.
She told us this the last night of the class, and we're like, you waited to tell us this?
Well, sometimes I think sometimes we're afraid of success because we're afraid of what other people will say about our success. Because there are people who are jealous.
Yeah. I don't know what her reasoning was, but it was just like, wait, you what? You what?
Yeah.
How awesome is that?
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, there are people who, I guess, like quilting is considered a crafting thing, but there are quilts that would be considered and are considered works of art.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, I don't know which kind of craft she did, but yes, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how you have to change the way you think about yourself. Because just recently, and I've been about stories for I can't tell you how long. Since we were kids, my sisters and brother and I and parents would have movie nights and we'd discuss them. You couldn't just go to bed and say, "Oh wow, what a great movie." Go to bed. No. We had to discuss the movie and talk about the characters and what happened to them and the choices that they made and the relationships that they had, all that kind of stuff. And for a long time, I used to think, oh, storytelling is not as good as math or science or, something like that. And then when I was teaching and the whole thing about STEM came along, I just was offended by that in a way, because it's the arts and humanities that teach us how to be human beings, not rocket science or solving a proof or, I mean, yes, there are cognitive scientists who, analyze human beings and stuff, but yeah. So then I just said to my sister, because we just started this new channel on YouTube called Classic Cinema with the Sage Sisters, and we just talk about the classic movies that we watched.
Oh, I love it.
And we watch, together sometimes, and we love Turner Classic Movies. And so I said to her, I realized that I love stories. I'm all about stories. My whole career, practically everything I've done in work and education has all been about stories. And I'm claiming that. And I'm going for that. And I'm going to advocate for that because stories are the oldest teaching tools. And, speaking of communities, my husband and I just joined Prolific Writers Life. Lorraine Hatia was a guest of mine twice, and she was talking about writers community, like your creative community. And she and her husband wanted us to join to be experts. Like, I didn't think I was really an expert, but Barry is, he laid out my book. He's a graphic artist. So we joined, and then I was talking to her in one of the events that she had, and she said, "Well, I want you to write an article for our newsletter. What would it be about?" And I said, "Well, it would probably be something about stories because stories are the oldest teaching tool." And she went, "Oh my gosh, you've got to write that." So, so I did, and she's going to publish it next week. So, yeah, I think we need communities of where we have our interests. And we need communities of other types too, like our neighbors across the way watch our place when we're gone, and they give us eggs because they have chickens, and 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 we check on them, and they've had they've had some health issues and accidents. And so we check on them periodically. You need those kind of groups too.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to ask this question about your make bad art. Do the people stay once the 6 weeks is over? Do they still continue to communicate with you and with each other? Is there a mechanism for that?
I'm working on that mechanism because I really, really have loved everybody who has come through this course so much. And I always kind of go through withdrawal when it's over.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm working on how we can do that in a way that makes sense, especially because, the folks from one group, I'm sure, will get along famously with the folks from another group. And so it's like, how can I do this and have it work in a way that is, workable for them and not overwhelming for me? And so, yeah, what does this look like? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just started a Facebook group for classic cinema because, I wanted people to make comments. And sometimes they don't on YouTube. And, I only have like 4 or 5, we only have 4 or 5 videos up. And some of them are just like intro videos and, teaser trailers and things. But, so it's really brand new, but it was great to start it this week and already have people, because I asked, what are some of your favorite classic movies? And people responded. It was like, oh, wow, that's so great.
Yeah.
So I hope that works out because I'm sure you could build a huge community. I'm sure you could. You will.
I think so. Through Make Bad Art, I don't think you ever totally, recover fully from perfectionism. So I say we're still recovering perfectionists.
Yeah.
And I think, that community is still valuable, even though it sticks with you. I think it's something where it would still be valuable to be in touch with that community and that vibe. But it does stay because it does change you. And that's part of why the course is 6 weeks, is to have enough time for you to really integrate it into your life and into yourself. So that, the ideas that we're working with just become part of your norm, so that you have them ingrained well enough to stay with you when you leave. But it just seems like when you reconnect with who you really are underneath all of those rules, your life gets so much better. And it's not, again, like, the course is called Make Bad Art. It's not that you have to be an artist to take it, because you don't. And art is people have asked me, like, is it about the art or is art the mechanism? And I'm kind of like, yes. It's
yes and yes.
Both. It's this overlapping thing. But it's really, it goes well beyond whatever your favorite form of creativity is. It's something that becomes the way that you are in the world.
Right.
And so, like, to give you another example, one woman who came in during the first round told me that she, in the first session, that she signed up because she wanted to get rid of her perfectionism, and she also wanted to see if I could prove to her that she wasn't creative. And I thought, okay, this could be interesting, because you never know how attached people are to the idea that they're not creative, right? Sometimes it's like super easy. And sometimes people are really kind of oddly devoted to this identity of, I'm not creative, So I thought, okay, well, this could be really interesting. But half an hour later, when we did our first exercise, she proved it to herself. And we all kind of sat there and looked at her like, you see what you just did? Like that was incredibly creative what you just did. I think you're good, And then, she went on through the course and had a lot of real moments of insight. And by the end of it, was was really at that point where she said, you know, a lot of the rules are really arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get to decide which rules I need to follow
Mm-hmm.
and which rules I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And this is usually the point where I make the disclaimer, you know, there are rules that are important. When you go out in your car on the road, I want you to follow the traffic rules.
Right. Yeah.
Those are
Right.
important.
Right.
There are moments to be more of a perfectionist than not. If you are a brain surgeon, I want you to be pretty close to a perfectionist when you are operating on someone. Same thing if you are, say, an air traffic controller.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're done, it's okay to let that go. Right. And same thing, you know, when you get to your destination in your car, you can chill. Probably, depending on where you're going. If you're going off to your job as an air traffic controller, you know, then all bets are off. But when I talked to her about a month after, she told me that, you know, she is having so much more fun now. And she's in a social group where she was so funny because she was baffled by this. And she said, I'm having all of these conversations now with these people who are like, they could be my kids, and I don't know what's happened. I don't know why. And I said, I do, because you're having so much more fun and your energy is so much younger and more alive. And that's what's attracting all of these people that you wouldn't have attracted to you before. Not like, you know, in a romantic attraction sense, but just like they want to come and hang out with your energy. That's what it is. And I don't necessarily mean energy in a new agey sense. It's just that, you know, thing that you're giving off is just like really cool and welcoming, and they want to come hang out with you. That's what it is. And it's because you're not worried about the rules all the time. You're just relaxed and having fun. And that's it. And that's what I mean when I say make bad art is not just about your creative work. It seeps into everything else about your life. So, you know, if you've had strained relationships with, you know, your kids or, you know, your grandkids or your friends because you were just too stuck in the way things had to be all the time, they will get better. You know, all of those things will get better because you will be less burdened by it has to happen the right way and in the right time, and it should be this way and it must happen that way. You know, all of those things are what confine us and keep us in that miserable, icky, has to be exactly right place where, you know, like can see my whole body is contracting as I say this.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be like that.
You know, as you were talking, I was thinking, who came up with those rules?
Right?
It was probably somebody who was afraid.
Or it could be, because we had a discussion about this one night in the one session, it could be that it was a rule from 100, 200, 300 years ago that made perfect sense at that time, but doesn't make sense anymore. And it just became a custom and we kept it, even though the situation that required it then doesn't exist now.
Yeah. Or maybe even longer ago. But the thing is that people can be creative in different ways. It doesn't have to be artwork. Like, I know people who are totally left brain. They love charts and, you know, graphs and spreadsheets and that kind of thing. And I think, well, those kind of people are the people who come up with new, better ways to keep data and to store it and to show it so that it tells a little story, you know, about the health of the company or how sales are going or whatever it happens to be. Or they come up with new ways to organize the teams at where they work or something. Those are all creativity too.
Yeah, any kind of problem solving is creative.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But we don't think of it that way.
Nope.
I don't think.
We define ourselves out of our own creativity an awful lot of the time.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, I have told this story a couple times in the last couple of days. I grew up with an electrical engineer. My dad is an engineer.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, I grew up with that kind of problem solving my whole
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
But he's always had a great eye for design. He was always the one, you know, when I was working on some kind of goofy visual art project, which I say goofy referring to myself, not necessarily the project, because my brother got all of the visual art genes, not me. You know, if I needed somebody to like tell me where the center of the circle was, my mom would send me to my dad because he would have a much better sense of that than she would. It
Yeah.
turns out my dad is the one who's really good at arranging flowers. And my dad and my mom are the reasons that I ended up being sent off to children's choir as a wee lass. And it stuck. And I've been a choral singer ever since. And they have been choral singers their whole lives.
Oh.
And when I got to college, my college choir had so many engineers in it. There is a huge overlap between engineering and music that is often unremarked for some strange reason. You know, just because you have a very so-called left-brained job doesn't mean that you have no right brain tendencies whatsoever. It's just not true.
Right.
It's just not true.
Not only that, when I was getting my master's of education, because I was going to teach high school, some article or something that I read said the thing that people don't understand when they cut the music programs is that music is mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you you need to sing a quarter of whatever it is higher than, you know, you need the key that's a quarter higher than what you're singing now. And it's like uh okay, people who don't do music don't understand that. They don't understand that if you're musical, it helps your mathematical side of your, I'm doing the wrong sides. But yeah, so the arts are really important, and it's very sad to me that they've sort of gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
But
Well, and the same thing, you know, it drives me crazy when I hear people say that, you know, who needs a theater degree? You know what people can do with a theater degree? They become fabulous salespeople. You know, they're really good at setting up presentations. It's all sorts of things that you can do with a theater degree.
yeah,
It's not just you're going to go become a starving actor.
right.
And to say that that's the only thing that you can do with a theater degree is really, really short-sighted.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's true of any arts degree. There's so many things you can do.
yes, really. One of the things that I found an article was what I ended up doing with my theater degree or something like that. It was a person who was in the business world, but he had a theater degree, and so I put that article up on, I think it was my acting class, you know, for them to read, so that they and I've had students say, you know, I was always so afraid to do presentations in class, and once I took acting class, and one of the things you would say to us was, they want you to succeed. Then I kind of relaxed and I went, oh, okay, I can do this. You know, so it helped them in lots of different ways, even if they weren't going to continue, you know, acting.
Right.
So, yeah, communication. And that was the thing. I used to teach communication, but I had to stop doing it because theater's not considered a communication discipline. It's like, oh my God, that must have been chosen by people who don't know anything about theater, because theater people analyze things down to the minutest little detail, the characters and what they're doing and so on and so forth. And if that's not communication, I don't know what is. So I had to stop teaching communication. What that was fine. But yeah, that was at college level. And yeah, so that's so great. And if you can get that started, then you're going to build this big community. It's going to be so great.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Now, you know, I have that you wrote books, that you are a novelist. And you know what? I don't think I asked you that when I was putting stuff up on Patreon last time. Tell me about your books.
So I have one book.
One book, okay.
It's a young adult fantasy novel called The Silver Child. And it was my MFA thesis novel.
Oh.
Which, again, speaking of things that were a surprise to no one as much as me, when I went for my MFA, I did not think I was going to be writing a young adult fantasy novel. I think I thought that I was going to be writing, some kind of adult fiction novel. And it's kind of hard to remember now because we're going on, gosh, it's like 18 years since I got into that program. And then when I got there, I had this clever idea that I would write a short story collection for my thesis because I was being extremely logical. And I thought, well, that'll give me an opportunity to experiment with lots of different things. So I will write a short story collection. And I was forgetting one very, very critical fact about myself, which is that I have never written a short anything. And so it's like,
oh, that sounds so familiar.
Minor detail that might be a problem. So I managed to write a couple of short stories, and I had actually, a couple months before I started the program, I realized I hadn't written anything for a while. And I thought, do you think maybe this is a problem if you're about to go to an MFA program? So I found this first line prompt that had a blank at the end so that you could fill it in yourself. And I started playing with this prompt, and I ended up with a page, and I was like, well, this is intriguing. And I kind of kept going with it. And I didn't really know what it was, and, kind of left it because it wasn't too long before my program started. So it was just sort of sitting there. And when the program started, I thought, okay, I'll keep this in my back pocket. So if something happens, which was not unlikely because my grandmother was not doing well and it didn't look like she was going to last very long. So it was like, okay, if something happens and I'm pulled away from my ability to write anything, I have this and I can send it in if I need to. Well, that happened in my third packet. I went to Goddard College, and everything you sent in, it was low residency. So you mailed in your packets of work every 3 weeks. So my third packet, here I am pulling out my emergency story. And I sent it off to my advisor, and I said, I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's a short story. I don't know if it's a novel. I have no clue what it is. But here you go. And, we had to include a letter telling, what we were working on, how things were going, what was going on in our lives. So I told her, like, my grandmother's in the hospital. I don't know if she's coming out, all of this. And I get a packet back from her that said, this is not a short anything. And I was like, I should have seen that coming. And she said, but it would be a great thesis novel if you decided that you wanted to change what you're doing. So I had to make a very rapid decision in the middle of the first semester. Do I want to switch or do I want to keep going? And I ultimately decided to switch, and it became my thesis novel. So yeah, the other thing I hadn't really thought through when I applied was the part where I'd never finished writing a novel. I had started many and I'd never finished them. And when I got to the end, I was like, do I even know how to finish a novel? This could be interesting. And I kind of rushed the ending on my first draft, and she was not my advisor at the time, but she was my second reader, and she called me out on that when she read the draft, and she was like, yeah, you really wanted to be done, didn't you? But this is not an ending, and you need to redo this and all of that. So it got reworked in my final semester. And then after I graduated, I let it sit for a while so that I could have some time away from it, and kept working on it. And I graduated in 2009, and I worked on it for a couple of years, and I finally published it in 2015.
Oh, cool.
So this is actually 10 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fascinating to write it because it has two protagonists, a 17-year-old girl and the 62-year-old doctor who delivered her, who never expected to have her turn up on his doorstep and say, hi, why did my mom send me to see you? And yeah, so they end up on this this journey to figure out what her story is.
Okay, sorry, our internet connection is unstable. And after you said why she ended up on his doorstep, went all really wacky.
Oh,
So
lovely.
can you say that again?
Yeah. So, yeah, so he never expected to see her again, and certainly not to have her show up on his office doorstep saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Hi, my mom told me to find you," as she
Ah.
pushed me out the door as government agents showed up. And he's kind of going, okay.
Oh, government agents. Oh.
So they have to solve the mystery of why she would have done that, and exactly what her story and his story, as it turns out, is.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go find that. I have to read that. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to write it. It was a lot of fun. And I got to work with Reiko Rizzuto. She was my first advisor. And then the late Rachel Pollack was my second advisor.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I had the privilege of working with a World Fantasy Award winner as my second advisor, which was amazing. Amazing. Rachel Pollack knew more about stories and myths and fantasy in the tip of her pinky finger than just about anybody else does in their entire body. And that was a wild experience.
That's so cool. Yeah, my first novel, I'm a theater person, so but when I quit teaching in 2008, teaching high school in 2008 and started teaching at the college, I decided I was going to write a memoir. Well, that was really horrible because it wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for that yet. I'm getting ready now. But I did write a novel, and it has two timelines. So it's two protagonists as well. The two people are related to each other. And now I'm working on the sequel, and it turned out much different than I thought it was going to, because the second one, I wanted the women to be involved in the various women's movements. Well, I started the second novel right after I finished the rough draft for the first one, and it was the woman in the past was going to be involved in the suffrage movement. And there was nothing for the woman in the present to do in 2014. So it wasn't until the whole Harvey Weinstein thing blew up that I went, oh, now I've got something to write. Well, it has turned out to be more political than I wanted it to. And now, I have to keep stopping because, well, it's sort of mirroring what's going on right now. And I don't know how it's going to end. So, so I'm sort of stalled in it a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to get back to it, and I'm going to look for people to help me too, because the both women that I was in a writers group with, who helped me with the first one, both have died now, and so I'm finding people from among my Story Power guests to help me write. And plus, I have Prolific Writers Life now too, people who can read it and help me with it. So, but I mean, I'm in the editing process, except for the ending. I don't know how it's going to end. I have to think about that. But yeah. So, oh wow. So, will you ever write another novel?
That's an interesting question. I keep thinking that I shouldn't use this word. There it is again. I keep thinking that I should. I have people who have been asking me if I'm going to write a sequel to The Silver Child, and I haven't ever really had an idea for The Silver Child as for a sequel, because I feel like I told that story and that needed to be told. I did once have an idea for a prequel, and I really think that would be the way to do it.
Oh.
And then I committed the sin that you should never commit as a writer. And I thought, I have this really, really great idea. And I even went and pulled out my copy of the book and started to reread it, to really familiarize myself with the whole story all over again. And I never wrote the idea down.
Oh, and now you can't remember what it is.
I have no idea what it is. And of course, I realized that I hadn't written it down when I couldn't remember what it was. So if something comes back to me, it's always possible. But I mean, it's been so long, though. As I say that, I'm thinking, how long did it take Margaret Atwood to write a second Handmaid's book? So it's not impossible.
That's right.
It's certainly not impossible. I did feel almost 2 years ago like I really wasn't writing as much as I wanted to, and that's when I started a newsletter, and I did it on Substack because it's more of a writing, especially long form writing friendly platform. And I did it just as a place to write whatever I felt compelled to write and get it out there. To have an excuse, and maybe more than an excuse, to put it out. And that has been pretty successful. And it really is, for the most part, the thing that I feel like I need to write. It's not tied to any one particular thing. I mean, I do write about creativity a lot, but it could also be about something that I realized while I was watching a Doctor Who episode from 1973. So, I mean, there's literally a post that I wrote a year or so ago about one of the classic iconic Doctor Who aliens, and the fact that it really shouldn't work, and that it doesn't even make sense as an alien. But the reason that it works is that the whole show is so committed to them working. And so, if you ever think that this shouldn't work and it doesn't make any sense and I shouldn't do it, well, hey, it's worked for Doctor Who aliens. It could work for you too, as long as you commit.
That's so great.
So it's like, this is kind of a metaphor for life. It shouldn't work, but it does, and this is why. So it's really kind of whatever takes me in the moment that I feel like I want to explore a little more and put out there. So that's really what I've been writing more lately. I've been thinking about, in fact, I'm probably going to do it this weekend, putting together a post with a bunch of different pieces of classical music that I've used for a music meditation that I think people would enjoy. Just like put on your headphones like people used to do back when plugging your headphones into the stereo and sitting in your comfy chair was a thing. Just close your eyes and focus on the music, which is a great experience that nobody does anymore because music is now background noise. And just, I experimented with this a couple of years ago and I want to start doing it again. And these were some of the things that I really enjoyed just sitting down and really listening to. So I want to put them out there in case somebody else wants to experiment. These are some of the things that I really enjoyed. Maybe you'll enjoy them too.
Yes.
So
that's great.
I put out whatever the spirit moves me to put out there on that newsletter, and people seem to enjoy it. So
that's great.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing lately. But fiction would be fun again.
Yeah, it would be, I bet. Well, that's why I started my blog in 2013, because it's like I didn't really know how to write, or I knew how to teach writing because I was teaching English, but I just needed to practice. That was it. I felt like I needed to practice. So I did sort of the same thing. And then I started my novel after I had been writing for quite a while. So it's only recently that I have, because I used to post something once a week on my blog. It's only been recently that I've kind of stopped that. I felt like, oh, I don't really need to do that anymore. And I keep my website for Story Power and for the classic cinema with the Sage Sisters thing. And occasionally I'll post something if I feel like it, a blog post. But mostly I've kind of changed gears a little bit. So, yeah, but that's so great that you're doing that.
I'm having fun with it.
Yeah. Because I keep a journal and I've been keeping that for a long time. And now I'm back to writing in it every day. For a while I wasn't doing that. And just writing something every day keeps me not focused, but keeps the juices going.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
When I wrote that, I just sat down and wrote down the article about the oldest story. Stories are the oldest teaching tool. I started it, and then I went to the sheet. They have these writers block of events, and so I went to one, and I told Lorraine that I was writing I was just working on the article. And so by the time we were finished with that, I reread it over and I said, well, I will send this to her and have her make comments and I can edit it or change it. And she came back, oh, this is terrific. It was like, oh, maybe all those years of writing my blog helped me,
Absolutely.
organize stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's all practice. It's all
Yeah,
writing. It all
right.
counts.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I never would have been able to do a thesis, so I was fortunate when I was getting my master's of in theater that I got to do a project, an acting project.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do writing with it, but it was all about the character and that kind of thing, which that was easy for me. But to do a thesis, I never would have been
Well,
able to do that.
that's part of why I did creative writing for my MFA.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I did a regular bachelor's in English for undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, when I started thinking about grad school, because my brother went off and got his master's in architecture, and he was just so excited about that program.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, you got to go to grad school. It's the greatest thing ever. And I was like, okay, but you're doing a master's degree in architecture. It's a little different and it's not going to be the same thing for me. And I
Right.
remember, I had that conversation with him where I was like, I absolutely do not want a master's degree in English lit, because it's going to be more of the same kind of stuff that I had to do in undergrad that started to drive me crazy,
Mm-hmm.
because it just starts to feel like you can make up anything, and any explanation for whatever's going on in that story. And I know, and I'm not saying this to be insulting to people who have English lit degrees, but when I was an undergrad in the early 90s and deconstruction was really popular, it's just what it started to feel like. And in fact,
Yeah.
there is a great XKCD comic that I think is called Imposter, and it has someone trying to fake it in 3 different fields, 3 or 4, and the last one is English lit, and he gets away with it every single time. Because each one, it like lists how long they succeed at this,
Mm-hmm.
and in every other field they're found out within days or weeks. And with English lit, it's like 3 years and 4 semesters, and they're still at it. And I was like, yep, that's kind of what it like. It kind of felt like, yes, you're through it, you'd be fine. And I had no desire to feel that way doing a
Right.
master's degree.
Right.
And I definitely did not want to have to do it for an entire thesis. And I also didn't want to have to go to some more traditional creative writing program where you sit in a workshop and tear each other apart the whole time.
I know. Yeah.
Why would I pay to be traumatized that way?
Right.
Did not want to do that. And
Yeah.
Goddard's program was not like that. And unfortunately, Goddard College is no more as of about a year ago. So
Oh.
yeah, they closed the school. So the whole thing is gone. But while it was there, it was a very, very supportive program where that kind of stuff didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, it was exactly the right place for me, because I wasn't interested in being torn down or having to tear down other people.
Right.
And that happens a lot in creative writing programs.
Yeah.
Shouldn't, but it does. So, that was not what I was interested in. And so I chose pretty carefully, but I also like to think that the universe helped me choose, because Goddard was the program that I got into.
Yeah.
And I think that may have, helped keep me from picking the wrong thing.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I have never agreed with the whole tear people apart.
Mm-mm.
And then that should motivate them to be better. No, no, no.
No.
Well, and that wasn't how I was raised. So to me, it's like, you got it backwards.
It's completely unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you can make people better by building them up and building up faith in themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think too. And that's what your program is all about.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I love about it. That's so cool.
Yeah. Take the strictures off. And sometimes you do need structure, and sometimes structure is really helpful, which is why a 6-week course can be great. But, you know, take away the feeling that you're restricted by rules, that everything has to be perfect, that there's a right way to do everything. I had someone ask me before I launched the course the first time, what happens if I make bad art the wrong way? And I just kind of, I just kind of sat there for a second, blinking like the deer in the headlights. And then I thought, oh, wait, you're a perfectionist. This question makes perfect sense. You think that there is a right way to do everything. And I said, there is no wrong way to make bad art, except not to make it at all.
Right.
You know, as long as, you know, if the only thing that you have is a paper clip and a torn off corner of a piece of notebook paper, as long as you are willing to attempt to make something bad out of it, you will have succeeded at making bad art. You know, because it's really all just about being willing to play with it. That's it.
Yes, and as adults, we don't get to play enough, I don't think.
Or we think we shouldn't play at all because it's for kids.
Right. I am going to say that we've had internet issues today. So I was asking you, or I was saying to you that I think adults don't think that they get to play. That play is not for adults, really.
Yeah, adults don't get the opportunity to play, and we also don't think that we should play because we think that that's for children. And the really unfortunate thing about that is that when we don't play, we lose a really, really powerful engine of creativity.
Oh man, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true. Yeah. I mean, we have certain kinds of play, like we watch football games or movies or, you know, something like that. But play in terms of coloring or or painting or I guess some people do photography for fun, but you know, yeah, play like children play, make believe play. We don't do that very often.
Yeah. We watch kids. You know, I tell this story and I actually use it in my class that my nephew who is now 12, when he was 4, I was up for Thanksgiving the first year that they were in their new house, which was new to them, but it was a 100-year-old house. The kind with radiator heat. And if you've ever had radiator heat, you know that if it's not calibrated just right, it will make an unholy racket.
Yeah.
And it was clanging and banging and all sorts of stuff. And I think, you know, my brother and his wife had not lived in a house with radiator heat before that. And I'm not sure that they were aware that it didn't have to be that way.
Oh.
But her parents were also there for the weekend. And her dad said, look, this is not right. You need to call somebody and they will take care of this. And so they did. And finally, it was quiet in the house. But this 4-year-old, God bless him, sat there in the kitchen and spun us this amazing tale of what was wrong with the pipes. And there were alligators and there were snakes and there were all sorts of things in these pipes. And when he finished, he looked at one of the other adults in the room, and I remember this because I've got it on video, and said, now you tell a story about the pipes. And I'm pretty sure that all of the rest of us just sat there and went, we can't do what you just did. Because it was free-flowing improv. Every idea that came into this head came out of his mouth, right?
Yeah.
And we can't do it because we've trained ourselves to say, alligators can't fit into those pipes.
Right.
Sharks can't fit into the pipes. That's not possible. That won't work.
Right. Yeah.
But if we let go of all of that and imagine for a while that they can fit into the pipes, then we can really have fun. This is why improv gets as wild as it does if you're good at it.
Yes.
Because improv makes you get out of your own way.
Yes.
If we let ourselves play like that, like kids do, where we don't let ourselves get in our own way, boy, the things we could do.
Yeah. Maybe that's why people do cosplay and go to Comic-Cons and that kind of stuff. Because, okay, I get to be a Klingon or whatever.
Yeah. Get to not be you for a while and play around with being somebody else, which is in itself a really creative thing to do.
Yes, yes. My husband has a favorite saying, life is an improv.
It is. It is. And honestly, if you look at improv, one of the most important rules of improv is to say yes and.
Right? Exactly.
As soon as you say no to something your partner hands you in improv, you've pretty much killed your scene.
Yep.
But if you say yes and you build on it, then you're off to the races. As long as you keep doing that, that scene still has life.
Exactly.
And I honestly think that if you live your life that way, if you take whatever life hands you and you keep saying yes and to it, amazing things are going to happen. It's hard because we're so trained to say, I don't want that.
Right.
I'm not doing that. That's not good. That doesn't work. But if you learn to say yes, I'm still a work in progress on this. I keep working on it. But the more you do it, the better things get.
I think so too. You're right. Yeah. I can't remember who it was, but there was she was an Oprah guest, and I think she's a producer, might be even Shonda Rhimes, who said, this year I'm going to say yes to everything.
Shonda Rhimes.
My year of saying yes. And I thought, whoa, that's brave.
Yeah.
That's really brave.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man. Does the same thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So we need to say yes to things more often.
Yes, me too.
I love that. Well, I'm so glad that we got back together again. And
me too.
I'm sure you're ready to eat dinner. So thank you so much for being my guest again.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a great time.
Yes, it has been fun. And I just hope you get lots and lots of people to take your class.
Me too. You'll have a great time.
Yeah.
And you'll feel so much lighter.
Yeah. And especially when you get your bigger group set up, that could be really fun. So
working on it. Gonna happen.
Good. Well, you have a great evening, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you again for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a rating and/or review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. I invite you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/storypower, all one word. Or if you like, you can subscribe to Story Power on Apple Podcasts. It's my aim to build a community where we discuss the stories we love and talk about what we learned from them. I offer extra audio content and story suggestions to my patrons on both platforms. Remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Let's spread the story love. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.